My name is Amber Whittle, and I'm with South Bay Sarasota at the Florida House. And this is the second in our lecture series. They all go up on our website, which is southbase.org/Sarasota, if you want to see any of the other ones. And so we're going to start with John Ryan. He's going to talk, he is formerly with Sarasota County Stormwater, and he is going to talk more about the upstream portion of Sarasota Watershed Management. And then Ronda Ryan, who is the executive director of Sarasota Bay Watch, is going to talk about their more downstream restoration projects. So they're going to go back to back, and then we will answer questions. So John, please take it away.
Hi, everybody. I'm like Amber said, I worked for Sarasota County actually for 33 years in environmental programs, and just retired 3 weeks ago. So we're chatting about what's retirement like, and I said, I don't know yet. I'm trying to figure it out. And but it's going well. And so during that time, I did a lot of different things. I did end up in stormwater and was there for quite a while, but I was always in the environmental field and always involved in water quality. So I'm going to go ahead and start my slideshow. I like to show this slide because Sarasota County, I don't know if everybody's from here or knows this area, but we're a beach community. So when we think about water quality, if there's one thing that matters more than anything else, it's the beaches. The beaches really drive our economy. They're really important to us. And, you know, it's part of how we live and what quality of life means to us. So today I'm going to talk about this. I also threw some Rhonda stuff in there, you know, do some introductions, which I've introduced myself, and talk mostly about nutrient pollution, because that's the foremost thing going on here. And then Rhonda will jump in with Sarasota Bay Watch, and I'm also a member and founding member of Sarasota Bay Watch. And I said getting our hands dirty because it's totally a hands-on organization. We don't have offices. We don't have a lot of stuff. We pretty much just do things all the time. So it's a really fun thing to be part of. I always do this. This is part of my standard presentation, is that you know, we have to talk about wanting to make things better. There's at least an implication that things need to be better and there's something to be fixed. But what's easy to forget about is just how special the place is where we live. And because of our location in terms of being subtropical, we're kind of in a transition zone, and things like snook live here, live south of us, and not so much north of us. Mangroves are here, south of us, not so much north of us. There's also a great history. If you look at that sawfish, those things were 17 feet long. And just in the last 10 years or so, we're seeing them again. And we have a lot of wonderful things here. It's important to just cherish them, be happy about it, and not get too wrapped up in the doom and gloom of, you know, the environmental struggle. So we have a lot of challenges, and this is kind of along the same lines as what local people sometimes think is, oh my, we've got red tide, it's just a nightmare, and we're in a special situation. But really, around the globe, challenges are very similar. And I'll talk about that a little bit. But nutrient pollution is a worldwide challenge. Harmful algal blooms that are related to that, worldwide challenge, although the blooms are all different. And the fact that nature is less than it used to be, that there are less fish, there's less birds, there's a less of a lot of things. Of course, nature always balances in some way, but you know, nature's depleted, and that's really key to managing nutrient pollution. This is where we are. I wasn't sure who the audience was, so I thought I'd show regionally kind of where we are. So there are 3 counties in between Big Tampa Bay and Big Charlotte Harbor, and that's Manatee County to the north, where Bradenton is labeled there. Sarasota's in the middle, and Charlotte County's towards the south. And one of the things that's different about us is that, unlike those big bay communities and others around the state and around the world, our bays are little. Sarasota Bay is the biggest in that 3-county region, but as you can see, it's still pretty small. And the other bays are so small, you can hardly see them. Between the mainland and the barrier islands, there's a long, skinny, you know, a longitudinal or lagoonal bay that is limited. There's only so much space there. There's only so much water Seagrass is a very dominant feature here. There's only so much seagrass there. And seagrass is vitally important to us, along with oysters and other features, shorelines, mangroves. But the bays are little, and they will stay that size in the as our population changes. So Florida history, if you people don't know, is really interesting and really recent. So if you look at this graph down in 1950, that was around the time that DDT and air conditioning became available. And Southern Florida, around us and to the south, really didn't have hardly anybody in it. In 1950, Sarasota County had 29,000 people. Some of those people still, there's a few people around who still remember it, who weren't just babies then. And they all know each other. It was a small town. So now we're at 2020, and we have in the 3-county region over 1 million people. I don't know what the future holds. I just kind of drew a line over there. But by 2100, there'll be over 2 million people, probably. So I mentioned that because all the things that come with us being here will affect those little bays. The bays stay the same size, the population gets bigger. And all the things that come with us will get bigger. So for us to be successful, and that's what everybody wants, we'll have to manage well. We'll have to manage for a bigger population, same size bay, same size gulf. So even things like boating, even in the last couple of years, I'm a very avid kayaker and boater. There's so many more boats out, and Fish and Wildlife people are saying it's like Saturday every day now, where it didn't used to be like that. There's more traffic. So I'm going to talk about nitrogen today. And nitrogen is the pollutant of interest in Southwest Florida. And it is, of course, a natural thing. And it would, in nature, if there were no people here, nitrogen would be cycling through the ground and water and living things and through the air. The air is predominantly nitrogen, and so it's a natural thing. We shouldn't, sometimes people think of, we'll talk about it as a pollutant, and it's a pollutant, but it's not like plutonium, which is just toxic and deadly. It's a thing that we are made of, amino acids and proteins. We're nitrogen rich. All living things are nitrogen rich. It's part of the world. Nitrogen and phosphorus are the two biggies. The reason I won't talk about phosphorus, except right now, is that we have a lot of phosphorus. Phosphorus is mined in Florida. The Myakka River was mined way long time ago. And our coastal region has phosphorus. So a thing that is in great abundance can't cause an algae bloom because it's already there in abundance. But when you add the thing that's missing, they call that a limiting nutrient, then the bloom takes off. So for us, it's in other parts of Florida and around the world. But for us, if you add nitrogen to, say, a lake or Sarasota Bay, it causes a growth, and algae and small organisms usually go first, and then it goes from there. So phosphorus, not a big thing for us in terms of managing for healthy water bodies. This kind of reiterates, this is actually a picture about salinity in Charlotte Harbor, but I think it also characterizes the way nutrients work. So the glorious thing about nutrients and estuaries is that the nitrogen that comes off the landscape from land and is washed in as rain and travels in as rivers, enters estuaries that are like nurseries for all kinds of life. And actually an algae bloom starts, and if it's in the right place in a natural system, that nitrogen gets converted from one form of life to the other, and we have this fantastic abundance of life that is much greater than open ocean. This is a very vibrant and exciting place to be. Estuaries are really fantastic. And the nutrients are a driving force. When you watch those TV shows about all those giant amounts of fish, there's usually a statement somewhere in there saying, and nutrients are coming up from the bottom, or nutrients are, there's always a phrase about nutrients. And that's the driving force for the abundance that we love and diversity. A lot of different things live here. But when things get unhealthy, just like me, I'm overweight and I love chocolate and I eat too much. And so like so many Americans, we get out of balance, or health gets out of balance. That happens in water bodies too. This is a picture from Florida East Coast. This is a bay. Bays should not look like this. This is an imbalance that we don't have here in the West Coast, and we don't want. Over in China, they have looser environmental rules. You know, they're kind of like America used to be when we were in the industrial age. And this is actually in a bay, and it's just overgrown. Again, just an example of extremes that we don't want to see. Nearly everybody had a fish tank, I think, when they were a kid. And if it's unattended, it grows algae, some types of microorganisms. And that's how our systems are. If they are unnatural and out of balance, algae will dominate. And there are conversations about that, like in this subject, harmful algal blooms. Around the world, there are nutrient problems. Sarasota has them too. And around the world, there are harmful algal blooms, and they're related. There's a lot of science left to be done, but they call it harmful algal bloom, people all agree harmful algal blooms are on the rise, and there's a negative trend, meaning negative conditions are increasing. And we see that here in Southwest Florida. We have red tide blooms, and I've looked at data myself and plotted out time series and maps of the red tide species that we have. And it's definitely increasing and increasing in intensity. For locals, you'll remember 2018. That was the worst year I've seen in living here for 35 years. It was really horrible and grievous. So that's our local version of too much nutrients, too much imbalance. So, you know, that's mostly the negative side of things. Here's a little bit more. This is from a website called the Sarasota Water Atlas. That's something that I built working for Sarasota County, and you can go there anytime. It's got 1,000,001 things in it. But this is a graph of a sample location. When I was there, we built up a really good ambient water quality monitoring program. And sadly, we found over time that there is increasing nitrogen in the bays. We actually the scientific community had been hopeful that this was not going to happen because we've instituted some really great improvements, and we thought we've got a good handle on this. Seagrass was doing well for a long time. But the fact of the matter is nitrogen is increasing. At some point, it'll cross some threshold where problem conditions will occur. I don't think we're there, but there's some. We did have seagrass lost in the last few years. Perhaps we're at that point. I really hope not. I don't want to see, they call it a tipping point, where it tips over into a very unhealthy condition, and we just don't want that. But there are clues out there that things are in need of our effort, working together to manage better. So restoring a balance with nitrogen, you know, the biggie is sewage. So sewage and septage is where our waste goes. And the septic systems we've phased in Sarasota County, and Charlotte County is working on it. We're phasing out septic systems and connecting them to central sewer. That is a really good, necessary improvement. It's not a thing that we as citizens and neighbors can do much about other than supporting it. And I encourage you to support the elimination of septic systems in our urbanizing environment. They're great in a rural setting. They're better than the other options, better than an outhouse. But in a city, they're just wrong. In a water community, they're not good enough. The other big thing that's going on is advanced wastewater treatment. And that's a specific term about high quality treatment with low nutrient reclaimed water. So reclaimed water has been used for irrigation. Usually there's too much and there's a disposal option. So our wastewater comes from our houses, runs through a wastewater treatment plant, comes out the other side as a cleaned up water. It's absent pathogenic organisms, so it's not a disease causing water, but it's nutrient rich. Secondary treatment is not as good as advanced wastewater treatment. So the good news is Southwest Florida has relatively better wastewater treatment than other parts in Florida and many places around the country. But being a water community, we need that really good, high quality wastewater treatment, AWT, we call it. And we're on the path. Sarasota County, for example, just got a $110 million loan to convert their main wastewater treatment plant from secondary to advanced wastewater treatment. Yeah, it's pricey. All these things are pricey. What I would say to you is that when you own something valuable like a home or maybe your car, if you don't fix it as you go along, it gets more and more expensive. So we're better off facing up, paying early, and getting the benefits rather than waiting until things fall apart and then try to fix it. Just like a car, or like I always use the roof. If your roof is leaking and you fix it right away, you don't have much damage. If you wait and it damages your house, it's only that much worse. One of the second really big thing is stormwater. Now, stormwater, maybe a catchphrase for some people. It's rainwater falls from the sky, travels across the land, picks up pollution as it goes along, and discharges into receiving waters like streams, bays, Gulf of Mexico, beaches. So we have standards for land development. So new neighborhoods have ponds in them, and those ponds clean up the water and before it goes downstream. They are primarily a flood protection device that really works really well and has made a big change. Florida was completely flood prone. Historically, it was like a kind of giant wetland, and now it's much better. So the ponds and the design of the landscape for development is a great success story. Sarasota flooded grievously, even in the time I've been here, and is much better now. The challenge is some things were built before stormwater standards were for development. So we have to retrofit those with some kind of treatment system that reduces stormwater pollution. Fertilizer reduction is a big deal. It really does matter. And the one that's often left out of this equation is nature. Nature plays the dominant role in managing nutrients in a natural system. And nature being depleted is unable to do as good a job as it might do. So what I'm talking about today, this is kind of my take-home lesson, is we should work on restoring nature, we as people and neighbors. So a little overview of wastewater to just put some numbers on it. We talk about nitrogen in milligrams per liter. We don't need to talk about what that is, but sewage is around 30, secondary treatment's 15, but advanced wastewater treatment is less than 3. City of Sarasota is at 1.5. 1.5 is a great number. So if they were to have a reclaimed water overflow, it would actually meet stream standards in Florida, in this part of Florida. So streams in general are 1 to 1.5. So when you're at a 30 and you have a discharge into a stream, it's nothing like the stream. It's water, it looks like water, but it's really, really nutrient rich. It travels downstream till it gets to a bay and then kind of accumulates there. And it gets, it builds up excess nutrients, and not just in water, but in things like algae, and it can be in the sediments as diatoms, things like that. And our bays are even lower, about 0.5 milligram nitrogen. Like I said, great progress is being made. Septic systems are being converted. It takes time and money and engineering, but it is happening. There is progress, and we're upgrading to AWT, and it is costly. It is a lot more expensive than people think, but in the long term, we'll be really happy for it. Septic tanks or septic systems are kind of an out of sight, out of mind system, and a lot better than pooping outdoors, which is the tradition in humanity and on Earth. So it's like we used to poop outdoors, then we started using outhouses and things like that. That was a big improvement. Septic systems are better than that. But what's doesn't work for us in this modern world, and also because we're in a water environment. We're not in Arizona You know, it's not an arid desert. So our water bodies are important and we don't want them polluted. Septic systems put the wastewater underground, it travels through the ground and enters water bodies. And septic systems are a proven pollutant in important water bodies, including all the springs, the Florida Keys, Indian River Lagoon, and here too. But it's very proven in those other places. It's not a question of like, maybe they do, maybe they don't. It's proven. I read this really amazing book called The Big Necessity. This is why I mentioned pooping outdoors, because in fact, it's very common and is still billions of people around the world do that. That's an option. It's not a good option for us. I'm not encouraging it. It gives us some context that we're in a place where I would recommend, and other experts do too, we need to go to very, very clean wastewater or our ecosystems will be in poor condition. Surprisingly enough, picking up after your dog is also controversial. Many people oppose it. And so we created the Science and Environment Council of Southwest Florida created this outreach campaign with the Poop Ferry. And, for some reason, dogs are considered natural. And even though we have at least 50,000 dogs in Sarasota County alone, people think it's a natural thing. I would argue that if 50,000 people pooped outdoors, we wouldn't think it was okay. Fertilizer does matter. A lot gets applied. Some of it gets down to the bay and it's wasteful. There's no reason to over fertilize. We have a blackout period in ordinance. That's Amber Whittle's dad, by the way, in that picture. He has.
It is.
He's got a collection of antique clothes. Is that right, Amber?
Yes, vintage Hawaiian shirts.
Vintage Hawaiian shirts. There you go. She's getting it right for me. So fertilizer does matter. I don't want to dwell on it too much. It's not a mystery that it happens. So the other big thing is stormwater. How are we doing on time? You okay?
Yeah, I think
wrap it up if we're running.
Yeah, probably like another 5 minutes and then we'll go to Rhonda and then questions.
So stormwater and wastewater are really quite different. Stormwater starts out as rain. It's really clean. As it travels across the ground, it gets polluted enough to be more than a stream, more than a bay, but nothing like wastewater. It's much cleaner, but it's a gigantic amount of water. We have 53 inches of rain. It falls over the entire coastal region and drains toward the bays. So it adds up. Of course, there's some amount of that is natural. And actually scientists in Sarasota County and other places are trying to figure out, well, how much is natural? Nature needs that. We wouldn't want to take it away. And then how much do we need to deal with and reduce? A lot of this is the job of your government. Your government needs to deal with stormwater and wastewater management. There's not a lot you can do, but there are some things. So you need to, I would recommend that you pressure your government to do a good job on these things and support them when they need your support. So stormwater really matters. Sarasota County, for example, built the celery fields that you might have heard about. If you haven't, Google it. Fantastic example of stormwater treatment for flood protection. 200 homes came out of the floodplain with that project, but it's a birding destination that is known at least nationally, if not internationally. We spent about $25 million building it, and I bet we make $1 million a year back in birding tourism. And birders are the perfect tourists. They're polite, quiet, they have money, they are a perfect tourist. And so it's just like a win-win on so many levels. It's a great recreation site. The government's going to build those big retrofits, and if it's done right, it's really great. So this is kind of a reiteration of how stormwater works. It falls, it flows, makes its way downstream through the watershed. Some of the things we can do at our local, at a small property level, is have pervious surfaces. So things like you can have a rain barrel that catches the rain off your roof, and instead of running downstream and adding pollution to the problem, it's used on your property and soaked into the ground. There's pervious paver materials that are used here at the restaurant. There's a bioswale. They actually make a difference in reducing stormwater pollution. One of the more exciting things that's going on is some of the leading communities, including Palmer Ranch in particular, are really pushing ahead with really good pond management. And so this is a stormwater pond. It's got a lot of plants in it. This one doesn't show a buffer around the edge, but that's something they're doing. And over the last probably 7 years that I know about, some of these leading communities, really high value communities, are polluting less, fertilizing less, herbiciding less. They're having fewer algae blooms. They have more plants and buffers. And what they're seeing is that they're having birds and fish in their backyards. And so I've talked to men. One guy in particular, he came out of his house when we were walking on a tour like this, and he said, I had sandhill cranes nesting right next to my pool cage this year. My wife and I would sit out there and drink coffee. And he said, I want to live this way the rest of my life. And so he's just a regular guy in a nice neighborhood. Another gentleman caught a 9-pound bass out of a pond like this. And he said, it's because we're managing them better and we're seeing big fish that we didn't see before. And also a natural management is cheaper. So the HOAs, when they do it right and it still looks good, great way to prevent pollution at the home and downstream. This is just a grassy swale and it's a drainage feature. We've done studies showing that this, as opposed to a pipe system, has a 90% less nitrogen pollution going downstream. The grass takes up the nitrogen, it soaks up the water. A lot of the water never makes it downstream because of this. In bigger channels, Sarasota County built this thing on the left. We hardened, these are concrete kind of fabric to stabilize the bank. This is old thinking. We're not going that way. We're going towards natural channel design. The picture on the right is a much more naturalized channel, also stable, but able to reduce nutrients as the water moves through the landscape and goes downstream. So Sarasota County is very much embracing a natural kind of stream restoration for there's 600 miles of canals in our county, but it's also a Florida thing and is an emerging way to improves property values. It's more beautiful, but it also reduces pollution in a really low cost-effective way. This is the Kissimmee River, the straight thing along the right side. This is the channelized version of the river, and it's been restored back to its meandering pattern. It drains into Okeechobee. This is a way to reduce pollution in Okeechobee and in the Everglades. So it's a thing, it's happening. One of the weaker parts of the whole pattern is when you get down to the bays. So this is just an example of a seawall, but what a lot of people don't realize is Sarasota Bay is 80% seawall. A seawall cannot process nutrients like a natural shoreline. So there's a lot of room for improvement in our bays. Bays are nice, but they are not high functioning as a nutrient management like they could be and like they used to be. Another version is
John, I'm giving you your 1 minute past warning.
Okay. I probably have 2 minutes to go, but I'll get through it. The shellfish are another big one, and Rhonda will talk about that, how they filter feed and kind of convert plankton and nutrients into living things. That's what we want to do. That's what natural treatment is. You're converting things into a natural form. People forget that the fish stocks in the world are much less than they used to be. We have less fish than we used to be. If you read any history from around here, if even 50 years ago, it's quite different. You have to have a bay full of life to make the natural piece work. But here's I hate to be negative, so I like to try to figure out, okay, we have a challenge. What do we do? And I think this is a beautiful example. So in Manatee County, a coastal area was preserved as the Robinson Preserve and Perico Preserve. I was just up there this week. Now that I'm a retired guy, I get to go places. Here's a view from their observation tower. So this is a constructed landscape. Those water bodies were constructed and it's beautifully done. This is a big piece of how we make nature work for us. And it's a challenge. It's not easy, but I don't think we can have good water quality without nature in abundance. So how do we do it? We work together. And this is my last slide, Amber, almost done. what a lot of people don't realize is some of the great water quality and other innovations in Florida were actually done by the public, by citizens. Casperson Beach down in Venice was protected and preserved because the public said, this is what we want. There were hotels that were going to be built there, and the public said, no, no, we don't want that. There's a program called TMDLs and Impaired Waters in Florida. It came about because environmental groups sued the United States EPA and said, you are required to protect these water bodies and you haven't done it. EPA folded. They had no defense. It was true. And so it created this whole TMDL program in Florida and around the country because the public said, this is what we want. So I would encourage you, we're in this together, that don't underestimate the power of working together. That I really think that's the path forward. Let's do that. And that's it for me. Thanks very much. And I guess we'll do questions after Rhonda's presentation. How's that sound?
Perfect. Thanks, John. I think Rhonda's going to show her screen now.
There I am. I can see the people that are here. And let's see if I can give you. Okay.
Perfect.
How are we doing? Do you see what I see?
Yeah, we see
Looks
one
great.
big.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Okay, thank you, Amber, for having me in here. My name is Ronda Ryan. I am the executive director of Sarasota Bay Watch, but usually when people ask me what I do, I say that I am the queen bottle washer. I have been the queen bottle washer for about a dozen years, and that's really most of what I do. I'm involved in all aspects from the nitty gritty. Anybody who's worked with us knows I get covered with more mud than anybody. And then I get to do this kind of stuff. So this is our group, Sarasota Bay Watch. And I think that we have some people that are not from Sarasota. So, you know, if you haven't heard about us, you're going to be impressed by the end, I believe. We like the tag, a healthy bay is everybody's business. That seems to resonate with the group and explain our mission. Okay, so who is Sarasota Bay Watch? We're a group of, we're just a variety of people. We've got divers and scientists and lawyers and business owners, and I think all of them are boaters or kayakers or divers. But the main thing that we have in common is Sarasota Baywatch and what it stands for and what it does. Sarasota Baywatch was founded in 2006, actually in our living room. And we're a 501c3 grassroots organization. Our mission statement, we choose to preserve and restore ecosystems, especially the coastal ones. And the main key is citizen participation in education. So we're one of those groups that likes to get your hands dirty. We believe in hands-on education. We have a few focuses, and I'll talk about those: shellfish restoration, marine debris, youth leadership, and living shorelines. And how do we do our work? Sarasota Baywatch is in the middle, and we have all these entities that kind of swirl around us and support us. And this is a picture of just community volunteers and student volunteers. This one is a cleanup that we did on the bayfront. And even though we had an organized group of volunteers, there were people that were just going for walks and even on vacation. And they're like, what are you doing? And they would stop and they said, can I help? And they would want to go through the nets and release the shrimp that were trapped. So it's, people enjoy seeing what we're doing and being a part of it. The other entity are special interest groups. We participate with a lot of dive groups, one to the north, which is Suncoast Aqua Ventures, one to the south, Suncoast Reef Rovers. And these are dynamic dive groups that we have supported, and they support us. We work on their data collection and help provide divers for the efforts. This group in the middle with their arms out, that was a boating group up in Anna Maria, and they wanted to be involved with our scallop search. So we went up there and spent time with them. We have quite a few scientific partners. We say that Sarasota Baywatch is a community and volunteer organization. We do not say that we are a scientific organization, but we do follow the guidance of our scientific partners, which are numerous. We work with NOAA, FWC, we have Audubon in this picture, Moat. We're also working with Harbor Branch Oceanographic on the other coast. So these entities all are doing their own research and have their own studies and have their own work, and we try to dovetail with them and support both the organizations and the work simultaneously. It makes for great friendships, and it's just been so valuable. And then for many of our programs, having the municipalities involved, and even though this is just the police and the Marine group, to have your city and county involved with your projects is important, because you've got to have somebody to help you figure out how to dispose of the trash. You've got to have somebody who's going to help you with a permit to have an event at a certain park. So municipalities are actually a very important part of that. There may be a few hoops to jump through initially, but in the long run, you definitely end up ahead. So I'm just going to start and say, I do realize that says 2019 on that, but this was a very interesting infographic that we came up with. There's been a little delay with a thing called COVID over the last couple of years here that's made it difficult to record some of our stuff. I'd like to add that during COVID, even though some of our community projects, we had to delay them or postpone them, during that entire time, we were putting out clams using COVID precautions with screening and masks and distance, but I'll talk about it later. The clams were ready, they had to go out. So even though we didn't have the diverse amount of events, we were still working through COVID. But these are some pretty impressive numbers for the amount of volunteers that we had, the amount of boats. These are private boats that are donating their boats and their gas and their time. The clam restoration I'll go into. These are just impressive numbers. So even though my presentation is a little more touchy-feely, I'm not giving you a lot of graphs. When you see 29,000 pounds of debris in a year, you know, we're a little more serious than just the weekend cleanup. So moving on, this is kind of the way I envision Sarasota Baywatch. We're there, we have three main pillars of our program. And these are the things that we focus on. And then above that is Sarasota Baywatch. So marine debris is one of our programs that I'm particularly proud of. It started a long time ago, very, very small. Our first event, I think, had about 7 people in it, but now we definitely pull in a crowd. But marine debris, it's trash. Any way you cut it, it's trash. And, you know, we're all like having something fly out the window or actually accidentally dropping something in the water. So, you know, so much for the snarky comments about that. But the interesting thing is that 80% of marine debris actually comes from the land. So it's not just people going along and tossing stuff in the water. It comes from the land, goes into the water, hits the rivers, creeks, sewers, storm drains. And one part of marine debris is derelict fishing gear. It's sort of its own area, but very important and very impactful. It may look small, but it causes a lot of damage. And here's one of the things, for example, marine debris, these boats that are abandoned and left, they cause a lot of damage to the structure, to the inhabitants. You know that there are animals that are being affected by this, whether it's a spill of petrol out of that, or whether it's just the damage to the ground itself. This picture over here shows a net over some coral. This is one of the things that we see every time. When we are cleaning and have our divers down and they are pulling up nets, they are full of corals and sponges and little fish and little crabs and shrimp, and it's just all trapped in there. And when that comes up and when those nets are being washed around, they're just ripping that habitat up. This causes a disruption in the food source and in the animals that are there. Everybody has heard about entanglement from marine debris. We see it over on this coast. Actually, a friend of mine that works with Moat just had to head up north for a dolphin entanglement. It's the turtles, it's the dolphins, it's the birds. And this marine debris that is left causes the suffocation, drowning, and exhaustion. Not to mention, you've heard about the plastic bags that the turtles inadvertently eat. So these are a few pictures of some of our marine debris cleanups. Where we do our marine debris, we do them on shorelines. We take kids in kayaks and we paddle out to little shoal islands, and they pick up around there. Down here in the right lower, this is a law group in town that said, we want to do something. Can you help us figure out a cleanup? And we went down to the bayfront like on a Wednesday afternoon, and they picked up for a few hours and then went and found a happy hour. But you know, that's a lot of good work, and that's a lot of team building. The one up at the top here with all this wooden debris, John and a couple other guys went out with some students and they paddled out. There was an old fort and a bunch of wood, and I think that ended up being about 1,800 pounds that they huffed in kayaks and john boats back to the shore. Here, this is another good example of why you need the municipalities involved, because somebody had to get it from there. So down at the bottom with all these traps, Sarasota Bay Watch is working on an artificial reef cleanup program. We take a group of about 6 experienced divers, and these are not your normal divers. These are divers that don't mind visibility of 6 inches. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I really like to see a little bit further than 6 inches when I'm 30 feet down. So these guys go down, and it's a 2-tank dive. And the last time they cleaned up about 1,500 pounds and got 30 traps. And this is one artificial reef. These artificial reefs are supposed to be out there to promote fish growth. I realize they are fishing areas also and diving spots. But if you have traps and nets that are collected down there, you have the phenomena called ghost fishing, where these items were originally used to collect fish, and maybe they've gotten loose or they're not monitored. And so you have one fish that dies in there, something else comes in to eat that fish, they get trapped, the trap isn't being monitored. And so there's a large number of animals that are drawn to these nets and traps, and then they're killed in there, and it just keeps going for the life of the net and for the life of the trap. And up on the upper left, this is a group of us at the Venice Jetties. And the Venice Jetties, north and south, this is part of a Suncoast Reef Rover dive cleanup. They've been doing that particular cleanup for decades. Just some guys that go there, put on tanks, pull stuff out. When I met them, I said, do you ever keep track of how much stuff you pull out? And so that was the beginning of a beautiful relationship where I started digging through a lot of stinky stuff and figuring out exactly what was down there. And so we do these cleanups, but what we're doing is segregating the debris, and we're trying to determine, you know, how much lead is down there, how much square footage of this habitat is covered with a net. So we look at the nets, we measure them, we weigh them. It's impossible to count the amount of lures because there's just there's just hundreds of lures, and the fishing line goes on forever. But because of that and our interest in that, Sarasota Baywatch has also become a member of the Florida Marine Debris Reduction Guidance Plan. Now there's a mouthful, but what that does is put us in with a group of, most of them are government and federal agencies that are looking at the impact of fishing gear and trying to find a way to improve that impact. So I'm really proud to be a part of that effort. And
I'm going to jump in and just tell you it's 11 minutes until 11 o'clock.
Okay, great. So clearly there's a lot of benefits to cleaning. Obviously, it looks better, it's safer, environmental, but a very important one is that it's economic. People come to Sarasota because it's a beautiful place. We have beautiful beaches, we have lots of birds, there's good fishing. And if our shorelines and water are damaged with the debris, then that has a strong effect of our economy. One of the problems that we have, people like me and our groups and our type of people, is we overwhelm people. Oh, we start talking about these worldwide issues. Well, you know, that's just too much. This isn't a weekend cleanup. We got to start small and realize that changes in marine debris and water quality begin in our backyard. So that is a little bit on marine debris. The next thing I'm going to talk about is our shellfish restoration. We got involved with this because of the forces that are against our clean water, the harmful algal blooms that John had talked about previously, decrease in water quality, and then the loss of the habitats and the life. So why did Sarasota Baywatch decide to dip its toe into the shellfish restoration? Shellfish have natural filtering properties, remove nutrients like John had talked about. Having them there provides diversity and inadvertently promotes seagrass growth. So you think, well, how does a little group like Sarasota Baywatch manage to get into this? Our organization is community supported and community funded. And the way that we do this is we currently have the campaign for clean water. That's ongoing on our website, so people can donate if they think that's a project they're interested in. The other one is our annual fundraiser, Scallopalooza, It's Clamtastic, which is coming up on February 12th at the Hyatt. We currently have about 375 people coming to that. And that is where we raise the money to buy the clams to get these initiatives off the ground. So historically, Sarasota Baywatch was originally involved with scallop restoration. We did that for quite a few years. It was very exciting, trying to combat some of these environmental challenges. But then we were hit with some spectacular red tides and realized that the bay scallops were the canary in the coal mine and not enduring the red tides that we were having. So what we did is we flipped our efforts over to another shellfish, the southern hardshell clam, which is a native of this area. We also call them campies. They're very tolerant to condition changes. Actually, after our first few releases, we put them out there, went out after awful red tide, looked at them, and we still had a great survivability with these clams, and they were doing great. The filtration rate varies based on the size of the clam, 6 to 20 gallons a day per clam. That's a lot of filtration. And these guys lived 30 years, where the scallops that we were working with had a lifespan of 1 year. And anybody who's seen these clams, they have very thick shells. They're very resistant to predators. So how do you figure out where you're going to put it? Well, John Ryan is actually somebody that we can thank for this. He took decades of maps of the presence of shellfish, overlaid those maps, then took decades of maps that talked about the seagrass presence, overlaid those so we could see where there was seagrass and the seagrass had come back. We could see where there were once shellfish and now there's not. And that is helping to determine where those sites are. Sarasota Baywatch also has an application in for a lease for our clams in the Northern Bay. The hope is to use that lease as a staging ground where we would bring clams in, set them there, and then deploy them from there. While the clams are there, the convenient thing is it's also, they're going to be reproducing and growing and spawning right there. So that is a benefit and part of the goal. So Sarasota Baywatch, you know, we have a history, we've gotten good grants, we've involved a lot of community, we've got the lease, we're a cooperative partner, and we feel like we have made a difference regionally and even statewide. There's a lot of discussion about using clams as mitigation. The counties and sea grant agencies have a lot of discussion regarding restoration. We have a lot of scientific partners. Some of them are using our sites as a research area. For example, we have one, Kim Hull from Moat is putting out acoustic receivers to monitor predation and putting out Cyclops monitors so they can film the animals that are coming. We also are helping other organizations, the Sanibel Captiva Conservation Foundation. They helped us with a boat. We helped them with some clams to work on their own projects down there. And of course, we're involving students.
5 minutes.
Okay, got it. So here is one of the strongest peers of our program, and this is our youth. We tap into schools and small clubs, and they help us all along the way. Anybody who's got a small group, anybody who's got a small group and is trying to get work done realizes that kids are energetic, they're strong, and they have fun. By us, wow, sorry about this. It's sort of on its own thing. These kids, actually, we're providing them with experiences, and we are giving them an educational offering with that. This allows them to take the science out of the classroom. The older ones learn leadership because we let them teach younger kids. Anybody who has kids knows that kids love kids. So you can get your message across a lot better. It allows the older kids to learn to organize and motivate, and that in turn creates teachers. Kids are the best PR department you've ever had. They're very social. They want their friends to come with them, and they're going to talk about the things they've done. They're thrilled about the number of plastic water bottles, and they I'm sorry about this slideshow. And they're going to talk about what they're doing and how they're going about it. Okay, let's see if we can get back to the slideshow. Sorry about this, because these are some really good ones here.
I see Amber talking, but I think you're muted, Amber.
Yes, my other one is muted. If you just have a couple more, go for it. Yeah.
Yep, I do. So we get these kids and they get out with their snorkels. They're real passionate about wildlife, hopeful. Youth education is the succession plan to create educational leaders, and we need their generation to help recall the past and march us into the future. We need to guide them and make them heroes, and that is one of the main responsibilities that organizations like Sarasota Baywatch have. So that's it. If you're interested in any of the things that we do, we have a website, www.sarasotabaywatch.org. Okay.
All right. Are there any questions? I'm looking in the chat. Can you guys see? There are a couple of questions from Drew. My chat will come back up. There it is. I think there were questions for you, John, starting with. about outhouses and squirrels and
Right.
raccoons.
Yeah, it's a matter of scale. You know, an outhouse is better than pooping on the ground. And in a rural setting, it's great. You know, it's better than nothing. Yeah, and wildlife is there. So, but what we look at in terms of the overall balance of things is nature was working fine when there was, you know, 50,000 people living around here and the bays were full of life. But over time, you know, it's become imbalanced. And I don't think that's because of squirrels. I think it's because of people and, you know, just how we live, our wastewater, all the things about how we live. And so I think that's the predominant feature. In this environment, you know, I don't need to reiterate it. I kind of talked about it, that good wastewater treatment is really central to clean water.
Yeah, Steve Swa always says that it's wastewater inputs, it's fertilizer, and then it is atmospheric deposition are the major nitrogen sources. So stormwater is just sort of picking up all those things on the way out.
Yeah, everybody has an opinion, you know,
Yep.
and we as professionals, we kind of go back and forth and disagree, but we also work from a place of a lot of knowledge. It's not just an opinion.
Exactly. And things evolve over time too. So does anyone else have any questions?
It looks like Barbara asked,
Yeah.
has the Bay Sarasota reached out to you for support, which I believe is for Rhonda, I think.
Has the Bay Sarasota,
So that is the group that Sandy Gilbert contacted us about the Bay project, and we had
yes,
agreed
okay.
to provide clams
yes,
to part of their restoration. It's a downtown Sarasota project, really great project.
Mhm.
And one
yeah,
of
we
your
provide
pictures,
clams.
one of your pictures had marine debris being pulled out right there at the bay by the Van
Sure.
Wezel.
Oh,
Sure, and we do
yeah.
that quite a
You know,
bit.
one of the nice things about the marine debris, believe it or not, is some places it constantly is being reintroduced, but other places, once you clean it up, it's actually really old debris and it's clean. So we have places we've cleaned, like the Neville Preserve, they're clean now. Other places like the jetties get dirty every year, and sadly, but so yeah, we'll be working with them and others. Ellingide, there are other coastal areas where we're a kind of a friendly group. We make friends with people, and people ask for clams, and we're glad to provide them, unless it seems like a habitat where they can't possibly survive.
So yes, as far as Bay Sarasota, we do have an agreement. We will be putting clams out there. We thought they would be out there by now, but because of the engineering that's going on there, they asked that we wait to put them in. So my thought is that those particular clams may go in at the end of 2022. So we have those clams, they're hanging out, they're filtering water somewhere else, waiting to go to that area. We will be doing some monitoring of that area before we put the clams in and then after.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah, actually, I had a quick question. So just in terms of like clam fishermen or people who are like, hunting clams for, food, like, is there any worry about that, like across, like these clam restoration efforts, or is that just kind of a non-issue because they aren't taking too much, or, they aren't allowed to be in those areas?
Well, here's the thing. Who doesn't love a good clam, right? Yeah, we all love them. And we do have a little worry about that, especially in some of the areas that we're putting them in. So because of that, we're a little vague about our sites that we put them in. We don't mark them and say, all the clams are right here. Don't touch them. So yeah, there is a concern about that. And we are monitoring those. And we hope that with it, with the news that we're trying to work on restoration projects, that they will be left alone. Just to be clear, these are not commercial clams. These are not the clams that you are getting when you go to Captain Kurt's and order clams. These are restoration clams. They're a little bit different. They're a different species. Their shells are thicker.
Gotcha.
And
Thank you.
actually, some of these may actually have come from an area where they were doing a lot of filtration, so they might not be the ones that you want.
Just
Yeah, we're
very
very
dirty
much aware
clams.
of the poaching per se, and then accessibility. So we don't deploy in places where it's really, really easy for a person to wade in and get clams. But there are a lot of other considerations too about survivability. And we're working with the Gulf Shellfish Institute to really get a really strong understanding of how to succeed. And, there are a lot of variables, and we need to work through the scientific community and also just the physical experience of doing it. We learn a lot.
And just to add to that also, that Sarasota Baywatch, we have some scientists in our board that are working on deployments. We also work with Gulf Shellfish and Moat, but we are in the process of hiring an outside entity to help us with that monitoring and auditing of our process and survivability.
And honestly, the clam farmers are really, really valuable and informative partners that we work with closely, because they know how to make things work. It's their business. And so they tell us a lot.
All right, last call for questions. All right, and we want to thank John and Ryan and John and Rhonda Ryan. And if you have any questions, they can both be contacted through the Sarasota Baywatch website. And just as a plug for Rhonda, they're currently doing a campaign for clean water in case you want to support any of these restoration efforts.
Clams, baby clams. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, great.
Thank you all for your time.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye.